evening. This is Tim Johnson, and tonight we have, I believe it's either the 40th or 41st time that our radio station, WTSA FM Brattleboro, has come up with a live candidates forum. And now with the arrival of one of the candidates, all 8 have made it. Thank you a lot for the opportunity this evening. Just to explain the format for tonight, we will be asking all 8 of the candidates to give us a rundown of why they think they should be elected, and then in differing order, changing each time with the lineup, we'll be asking questions. We have people here in the audience. If you'd like, please write down a question on the notepad supplied in the corner and send it my way. And also, if you are listening at home or watching on Brattleboro Community TV, we invite you to phone in. Actually, instead, we invite you to email your questions, and it's very, very easy, tj@wtsa.net. So we are looking forward to you being a part of our event this evening. And again, very important that we all take part in this thing we call democracy. We'll talk more about that and how you can be a registered voter if you're already not one in just a bit. Tonight we have 2 candidates for a 3-year seat on the Brattleboro Selectboard. And we'll be a little bit looser with the timing tonight, as long as none of you take advantage of it. Tonight, in no particular order, we would have Spoon Agave present why he should be a candidate for Select Board. Spoon, good evening, and please begin.
Good evening, Tim, and thank you for the opportunity and everybody else that's made it happen. It's nice to be here again. I am running because, as everybody here, I have a lot to offer. I have a wealth of experience, but I also bring another perspective, and that is I feel like I am the candidate for the future. I am concerned about the future as much as I am about what's happening now. Of course, and you will hear this throughout the evening, we have to fill the potholes, we have to balance the budget, we have to keep taxes down, we have to be concerned about the infrastructure, about education and all of the other things, the arts and what have you. These are the kinds of things that are taken care of routinely by the board. But I think we all know that there's a very different look to the future now than there was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. And we have to be cognizant of that. We have to think about it. We got to get a lot of information about the past and about the present and find out what kind of progress we've made, and we have to understand where we're headed. And I have a lot of experience. I am aware of what's happening locally. I know what's happening on the state level and everywhere else. The fact of the matter is, the problems can't be too big for us. Frankly, if the economy weakens more and housing prices go down and the grand list goes lower and the tax base erodes, it doesn't matter who is responsible for the economy declining. Our tax base has declined. It's our problem. And consequently, I am concerned about these major issues and how we will be able to deal with them for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Spoon. Also running for the Brattleboro Select Board for a 3-year seat is Ken Schneck. Ken, good evening.
Thank you so much, Tim, TSA and BCTV. This is such a great opportunity, and it's so nice to finally meet some of the other candidates. My name is Ken Schneck. I am indeed running for the 3-year seat. I have wanted to run for the Brattleboro Select Board since I first moved here 4 years ago, as I was extraordinarily involved in local politics back in Westchester, New York, where I lived prior to Brattleboro. I attended a select board meeting within weeks of moving here, and I was sorely tempted to run straight away. But I'm a firm believer that you need to get to know your community before you attempt to represent it. After the past 4 years spent getting to know incredible neighbors, frequenting incredible establishments, and serving on an incredible town committee, I filled out the petition straight away on the ballot, got my signatures, 30 signatures, within a day or two of that petition being available. And for me, in short, the timing was right. I will bring a new energy to the Select Board, a fresh perspective comprised of equal parts positive outlook. I'm all about a positive outlook and levity to this table. Experience, I have a wealth of experience in local politics, as well as I did a lot of research on this. I have a PhD in educational administration, so it's something that's near and dear to my academic life as well. I'm really dedicated to listening. I'm far more about taking the time to listen and see what's going on before speaking my mind, and creative problem solving is a real strength of mine. With regard to the 3-year seat, I'm committed to this community, and I want to mirror that commitment in the length of this term. The 3-year seat is going to allow me the opportunity to participate in a real arc of town governance and develop even more institutional knowledge of this great town than I already sport. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. We are indeed blessed to have 6 candidates for 2 one-year positions on the Brattleboro Select Board. In no particular alphabetical order, the first we'll introduce tonight is Hillary Cook. Hillary.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks to TSA and BCTV. I'm Hillary Cook, and I'm running for a 1-year seat on the Brattleboro Select Board. I've lived in Brattleboro since 1998. Prior to that, I've lived in Dover and Newfane. So when you add it all up, I've lived in Windham County for over 30 years. It's with an emphasis in all things local that prompts me to run for Select Board. What could be more relevant in people's lives than serving on a board where the money is collected in the form of taxes here locally and services are rendered locally? I want to serve where we, as a town, can continue to provide a fiscally responsible budget, an agenda that provides focus on our core mission, and one that also offers services that provide empathy for those who depend on us the most, especially those at both ends of life. I'm a big believer that no pothole should go unfilled and that our streets should be plowed and maintained. I'm a big believer in our parks and recreation. We need to make we have made some significant capital investments in our park facilities, and that will serve us today and in the future. But those are the kind of historical responsibilities that we should expect from a municipal select board. I've served as a town meeting rep for the last several years and have gained an understanding of the budgetary challenges that we face as a town. The taxpayers of Brattleboro have little capacity to absorb any additional taxes or costs. I will be a diligent custodian of your tax dollar. I'm sensitive to the needs of our downtown. In these times of significant economic challenges, I consider downtown to be a resounding success. It represents our values of scale and our values of commerce. And I like that. And I like the kind of community I have and will continue to call home. I vision a select board through its leadership that can collaborate with the work at the Brattleboro Chamber of Commerce, Building a Better Brattleboro, and Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. At the same time, I and many others in town recognize the opportunities that exist to shape our future with other community organizations, such as Post-Oil Solutions and the Transition Towns Movement. In each organization I mention, the focus is local and the focus is community. And clearly there are more issues that unite us than divide us. If you see a future in Brattleboro like I do, I hope that you will vote for me, Hillary Cook, on Tuesday, March 1st, for a 1-year seat on the Brattleboro Select Board. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Our next of 6 candidates for 2 one-year seats is Catherine Chernus, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, BCTV. I guess I'm going to open and say, at 68, I'm the new kid on the block. I mean, I've only been here 6 years. In that time, I have joined the Development Review Board. I'm on the BCTV board. I was a member of the Alliance for the Arts, which has kind of calmed down for now. It's not around, but very interested in the arts. I produce and direct a 1-hour arts interview show for BCTV once a month. I think, I would really love to be elected to the select board because I think I represent a part of the community that I think is unrepresented at this time, and that is the seniors and the people who have to go for affordable housing, and like myself, the people who use the food shelf for eating. I subsist on my Social Security. I am retired. It's just something that I feel that is my responsibility as a citizen of this community in Brattleboro to be part of the decision-making on what happens in this community. I truly wish that there were more women running, but it's just me right now. Who knows, maybe if we extend the select board, we may get more women. I am a member of Safe and Green, which leads, the next thing is that, yes, I would like Vermont Yankee to close. I do have compassion for the people who are working there and hope that they will find jobs when it is shut down, but it's got to be shut down. Recycling is something also that I'm very interested in. I was just having a discussion with Joe before we started. There's an understanding about recycling, and our new coordinators are wonderful, but I think there are a lot of things that people don't know about, and that is composting. And that type of garbage, that type of wet garbage is a big problem. And we have to find a way to get people to understand how to do that, and there has to be a place for them to do it. So I will say, please vote for me on March 1st, and I will listen to whatever anybody has to say in the public.
Thank you. The next of our 6 candidates running for a pair of single-year terms is Joe Bushy. Joe.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, WTSA, and thank you, BCTV, for giving all of us this opportunity. My name is Joe Bushy, and I'm running for a 1-year seat on the Select Board. And very, very simply stated, I am a lifelong resident of Brattleboro in this community. I've been here my whole life, since 1959. I am very familiar with the community. I know most of it inside out. I would like to run for the Select Board. I would like your vote for Select Board because I would like to assist the citizens of this community in achieving the things that are important to them, both for current and future generations, for ourselves, for our kids, and for our kids' kids. And I think that I think the board could just use some representation from the average man, the common man, and a little bit of common sense. And that is why I'm running for the Select Board. So I ask for your vote on March 1st, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Next of our 6 candidates for a pair of single-year terms is John Wilmerding. John.
Thank you, Tim. My compliments to all of you. I think this is probably the best field of candidates that we've ever had for the Select Board. I wish I could vote for every one of you. And I think that the people should feel privileged to have a chance to choose from among us. My name is John Wilmerding. I have been in Brattleboro full-time since 1991 when I came to run the Brattleboro Music Center and the New England Bach Festival. Before that, I was a part-time resident of Halifax, Vermont, which is just a stone's throw from here, figuratively speaking, where my stepfather, Carl Barman, has served for quite a few years on the Select Board. So I've had a good role model, if you will, for community leadership. I'm running, I think, to sound a different voice and to raise issues that people don't usually want to talk about. I'm very, very adamant that Vermont Yankee should be closed. And it's against the conventional wisdom to come out on some of these issues, but I'm absolutely sure that we have to welcome more diversity in our community, people of color, people of different religions, people of different ethnic backgrounds. I think that this is one of the strong points of our community already, and it can only be stronger. And Vermont's status as the whitest state in the Union is nothing to be proud of. I've said that before, and I will continue to say it. This is an area where I really, really think we need to take a stand. Partly because of the inspiration of my wife, Carmen, I am very, very strong on environmental issues, especially recycling. When we started the recycling programs here in Brattleboro, I was the one who put the schedule up on BCTV every week. I taped a commercial for recycling with Howard Dean, who came down here to open the recycling center on Ferry Road. It's still in the archives at BCTV somewhere. I recycle at home, we compost at home, we use the Project Cow program to compost everything. It can be composted, and some weeks we have no trash at all. And I want to tell you that's possible. You know, you hear about people that don't, you know, they recycle so much there's nothing left. Well, it is possible pretty much to get there. I think our main exception to that is kitty litter, and I don't know if there's really a plan for kitty litter yet. But I would like to know. I think that we have a wonderful town. It's the best hometown in the world. I'm proud and happy to be here. I have 3 sons that I've raised mostly here, and this is a town that I want to serve and I want to give back. So I want to pay it forward also by opening discussions about things that people won't usually talk about. And I think one of my strong points is as a mediator, a trained mediator, and as the person who originated the reparative probation program in Windham County, I can help the board get past conflicts and help get to yes on difficult conflicts in the community, differences of opinion, and I hope that you will elect me as a proactive manager, administrator, and someone who really wants to do the town some good.
Thank you, John. The next of our 6 candidates is David Gartenstein. David.
Thank you, Tim, and I want to thank WTSA and BCTV. I'd also like to thank all the other candidates who are here tonight and who have made themselves available for the voters to choose from. I'm running for Select Board because of my keen interest in Brattleboro's participatory and representative democracy. I currently serve on the Brattleboro Union High School Board, having been elected 3 years ago. I also previously served on the Brattleboro Town School Board from 2002 to 2004. In both of those positions, we presented the voters with responsible budgets that made sure that our children were being educated and that educational programs were being preserved. The budget that we presented to the voters last week that was approved preserved programs for high school students and came in at 2007-2008 levels. While I was with the Brattleboro Town School Board, we also had difficult issues that needed to be addressed. I joined the board when the difficult decisions about the transition of the Canal Street School from housing elementary school students to the evening child care program were in process. It was a difficult decision that had to be made. We took all forms of community input, and ultimately that decision was made, and we were able to continue presenting balanced and responsible budgets to the voters of Brattleboro. I also recognize that development pressures play a large role in our community. I'm particularly well equipped to deal with those issues. I served 9 years on Brattleboro's Development Review Board, including 5 years as board chair. I had to convene, and I did convene, hundreds of public hearings where we listened to all voices on all sorts of issues that were brought before us, and decisions were made in the public interest about development in town. I bring a wealth of experience to the voters, and I look forward to having you vote for me, David Gartenstein, for a 1-year position for the Select Board. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The last but not least of our 6 Select Board candidates for the pair of 1-year seats is Chris Chapman. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Tim. Thank you very much. I have to say that this is actually the first time I've run for office. Usually, as you might have noticed tonight, I spend most of my time running to get to meetings on time. And I felt this was a good time to step up. I'm really a big fan of citizen government. I have never actually sat on a public board before, but I've had a lot of opportunity to see citizen government at work. I've also had ample opportunity to see government at work where citizens do not step up for 1, 2, 3-year terms. I lived, after I graduated from college, or after I graduated from high school, I lived in Chicago, which has a really colorful history of local government. I lived in New York, lived in Portland, Maine, lived in small towns in Massachusetts, where the gritty environment of local politics really comes home and where everyone can feel involved and immersed. We have that here in Brattleboro. We have that here in Vermont. Most of the time that I have been involved with citizen government is in the legislature as a sort of a part-time lobbyist for specific items that were important to me. And what I've seen is the legislature, a governing body that is made up of citizens, is a powerful body in terms of its influence on the culture of a region, in terms of its efficacy in representing its citizens. I've been inspired by seeing our legislators at work and been inspired by seeing long-suffering select board members to actually feel that now's the time for me to do my share. We're not asked to do an awful lot in our society. We are asked to vote, we're asked to serve on juries, and we are invited, welcomed, to run for public office and actually help maintain our own ability to self-determine, to determine our own futures. This is really a good time to be doing that. The town is in good shape. Financially, things are tight. They are always going to be tight, and I agree with Spoon. They are only going to get tighter. We are at the envelope, the edge of the envelope of where our needs meet our resources. It's a tight, intense place. Like a brimful glass, you find things sparkle at the edges. This is where the action is. I'm 54, will be 55 in a month. A good time of life to actually start giving back after all I've taken as a member of this community. I was born here, raised here, graduated from high school here, left, and it wasn't until 1991 that I was able to come back. And since then, I've served on a number of boards. Right now, I'm with the Boys and Girls Club. I'm with the Brattleboro Walk-In Clinic. I've also been with the Brattleboro Music Center, Vermont Jazz Center. Currently serve also as a volunteer on an initiative called the Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategy, which has been an eye-opener. And I serve as a volunteer in a number of other capacities, former Rotary Club president. I find that life is really rewarding when you're giving back. When you're taking, that's nice, but when you're giving back, you're really living. You're really living a full life. I want to be a part of that. Now, I'm not presuming that I'm one of the best candidates here. There are other people here whom I know from previous experience who I think are at least as good a candidate as I am. The man on my left, I'm extremely impressed with. That's a resume. He knows how to make a case. He does it for a living. Marshals evidence. Very impressive. I've known Hillary Cook also for a number of years from another setting. Very impressive guy. This is not to cast a shadow over the others. I just don't know the others very well. But this is really a great bunch. And if I'm elected, I will serve with everything I have. I will probably have to run to meetings to get there on time. But that's okay. Life is full, and that's the way I want it. To just summarize where I stand, I like the idea of innovation, but I see the town as like a crowded 747. And as a member of the cockpit crew, I think my job is more to make that plane fly straight and level and to land safely through any weather than it is to make that plane loop the roop or do barrel rolls. But also, I want to be in a position to help shepherd in innovation there are things that we can do and need to do. I have more to say on that, and I welcome the questions on it. That being said, I think that's actually more than enough. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Again, just to repeat to people listening or watching at home, if you do have a question, please email it. The email address is tj@wtsa.net. There are people here at the Brattleboro Municipal Center, where this forum is being held, that also are submitting questions. And with that, we'll take the first question via email. What can the Select Board do, and you as Select Board members, to make Brattleboro a more affordable place to live for those residents of the middle to lower end of the economic spectrum, without cutting more essential town services? We'll begin our responses with Ken Schneck.
There you go. You know, I think it's a mistake to approach the economy of this town by, and in my conversations with people over the past couple of weeks, it's what can people do in Brattleboro to help Brattleboro, the one and only Brattleboro that's only experiencing this problem in Brattleboro. And it's a really great opportunity right now. The timing is fantastic with a new governor who just 2 weeks ago introduced a wealth of proposals, dozens of different proposals to stimulate the economy. What Brattleboro needs to then do is cull through all those proposals, great proposals for veterans, around affordable food, around housing. Brattleboro needs to cull through those proposals, find the ones that are most relevant for us, and really see how much we can implement them to make a difference here. I am a believer that we're going to affect the economy, and I'm sure, as was said earlier, it's going to be on both the micro and the macro level. It's going to be important for us to talk to households and say, so how can we reduce your output and the expenses that you are incurring? And then there's also the role of the Select Board, which I think can do more to stimulate the local economy. I am in favor of the more that we can do to bring business here, the more that we can do to bring more money into Brattleboro. It does, all of the research says that money does trickle down, that money does affect this local, that our own local economy is stimulated by that. So I'm a big fan of the tax stabilization deal that the Select Board has worked out with various different organizations. And I think the key for us moving forward is to make it unique to Brattleboro, but also acknowledge that Brattleboro is in a wider context of other communities that are dealing with the same issues, that are looking for the same solutions. And I'm feeling really thankful that we have a governor, particularly one that has his eye on the bottom part of the state, who has all of these different proposals, so many, and I really encourage people to go out there and look. There are so many that are applicable to this community that can make a real difference, but need advocates on the Select Board to push them forward.
Thank you. We'll continue with Hillary Cook. Hillary?
Thank you, Tim. I've always been a huge proponent and champion for commerce, and I'm continue to think that in my role as a Select Board member, I can advocate for that. So focusing, the question was about being an affordable place to live. And I firmly believe that we need to not only find those jobs in Brattleboro that are for the higher earners, but those for the moderate and the moderate earners as well, because it's in revenue, it's in income that makes not only housing more affordable, but all the other aspects of life as well. Innovations, we need to always look at our inventory of housing, moderate income housing, and along with that, we need to always be cognizant of the tax base that is diminished when we take when we turn private housing to public housing. So I'd really want to be careful in maintaining that balance. I mean, every year we go to town meeting and we have this discussion because it's a real discussion. I also agree with Ken's observation that we're not, Brattleboro is not an island. Every municipality is struggling, or most municipalities are struggling. We're all in this financial situation together, and so I think that innovations from Montpelier, innovations from Washington, we can't count on Washington and Montpelier to the extent that we could in the past, because they're a diminished partner. We're in this for ourselves, and it's something we have to address and look at and solve right here locally. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Catherine Chernus.
We are responsible as citizens to communicate to who we elect in whatever office we elect them, to let them know what's going on in the community. Our select board people, a select board person is just one person, or 5 persons, or 7 persons, and they have to, the way they find out what goes on in their community, not only at the select board meetings, which are public, by the way, and I have stood behind one of those cameras for them and seen empty seats. So if you're going to want to know what your select board is doing and you want to let them know how you feel, you have to be there and let them know. It's just, and it's as much responsibility for the select board people to go out in the community and walk the community, not drive it, walk it, and find out what's going on. There is a lot of, there are problems. I've seen it by going down to the drop-in center, going to the food shelf. I have walked in there and the shelves have been empty. It's our responsibility as citizens to take care of our fellow citizens, not the select board to take care of everybody. There are things that we can do that don't require money. They just require heart and compassion and caring. And that's, I think, what I would like to bring to the select board is a change in the attitude that because things have been like this for years, it's been like years, let's not change anything. Things have to change. The world is changing, and Brattleboro has to change with it, and it has to become more aware of what's happening with the citizens in this town.
Thank you. Joe Bushy.
Thank you, Tim. There's a few things I think that the town and the select board can do in order to continue to make the town affordable for low to middle income folks, of which I am one of. One thing, I think it's important that we do maintain the affordable housing stock in town. Another thing I think we need to do is focus on green jobs. The carbon harvest place up at the landfill is just going to be a model for future sustainability as far as how that whole system works. I think we will see a return to farming, and I think with the return to farming, as we live in an agricultural state, I think that will provide jobs, additional jobs for the low to middle income folks, and it will also enable us to have greater security in our own food chain, our own food stock. One of the main stories in the current news cycle right now is all of a sudden everybody noticed that food prices are going up and gas prices are going up again. And I think as an agricultural state, I believe I heard Sarah Edwards say one day that we import 60 to 70% of the food that we consume in Vermont. That doesn't seem right. And low to middle income residents need to eat. I think food is probably one of the larger expenses in that household. And so I think it would be important, one of the things the town could do is to look for places to increase and have more large-scale community gardens. I know we have some community gardens going, but I think we could have more, especially as food gets more expensive and diesel gets more expensive and everything gets more expensive. So I think those are just some of the things that the town could look at to maintain affordability in town for low to middle income folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. John Wilmerding.
Well, a short few years back, there was something called a housing bubble, and it popped. And all of a sudden, a lot of people around the country found out that the houses that they're living in aren't worth what they thought they were. And during that time, I'm wondering what happened in the town in terms of the assessed values of the homes. I mean, if we're paying more taxes on our homes because our homes are overvalued by the town assessors, is this something that should get compensated for just the way the country bailed out the big financial corporations that got in trouble because of their investments in that housing? You know, I don't think that you should be bailing out big corporations when the common man needs a bailout, when the people next door to you and your family members are losing their homes. I have a brother who's in danger of losing his home just because he took out a home equity loan against the value of his house, and the house then lost value after the housing bubble burst. And hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people around the country are in this position. The town needs to look very, very carefully at how we assess the value of housing for the purposes of taxation. That's where the money to run the town comes from. And we need professional assessment, I believe, and we need to be able to guarantee that assessors do a very, very objective job and don't just listen on appeal to the people who have the time and the money to mount an appeal. You know, if you don't know how to make an appeal or you don't know how to mount one, you're stuck with the assessment that the town gives you. And the town could do better, perhaps, in the objectivity of assessing its property value. I also think the town could make life easier for the low man on the totem pole, if you will, for the poor, by consolidating the services that we provide to the poor through the kitchen and pantry programs that we have, the free meal kitchens that we have around town, and the pantry, the food shelves. In 1994, I helped organize a capital campaign to build a building, to buy a building for the community kitchen in Keene. And I raised $250,000 in leadership gifts to purchase that building out of an $800,000 campaign. Those were pretty big gifts. The town will unite around the needs of its poorer citizens. And I think maybe we could consolidate the different services that we have in our town for the poor and make them more uniform and more available.
Thank you, John. David Gartenstein.
We can support our low and middle income residents by encouraging responsible job growth, by supporting affordable housing, and by making sure that the educational programs that are provided to all children in town remain strong. I remember when I first moved here 30 years ago, being taken in by the vibrancy of the community. There has been significant change, but there's also been real strong stability in town. In the housing stock, we've seen restrained growth. I think that's partly due to the interaction between local regulation and Act 250, which helps to make sure that we don't have unrestrained growth here in Brattleboro. It's been very, very exciting to see some of the economic development here in town that's going on. Watching the new co-op building being constructed will bring a new feeling to downtown and will bring both affordable housing and more jobs and increased vibrancy to the downtown area. The new yogurt factory that's coming also is a perfect example of responsible, environmentally friendly development that will provide for jobs in the community. It's important to keep taxes down and to make sure that services are provided through the tax base that we have. There was a struggle last year about pay-as-you-throw, and the voters in town concluded pay-as-you-throw was not the way to go, but rather that we should continue with centralized trash disposal and increased recycling. It was a very good decision that was made. We want to balance the provision of municipal services so that we can also make sure that school programs are being provided so that our children have education and support in that forum.
Thank you, David. Chris Chapman.
Thanks, Tim. There's only so much that the Select Board can do to take on such a complex challenge as you've asked us to answer for. But there are things that the Select Board can do, and one is just to do its job very well. The Select Board has a very basic job. It's to just keep the roads clear and clean. It's to make sure the fire department and the police departments are staffed and well managed. It's an executive function that, and in the role of a Select Board member, what your responsibility to do is to make sure that everyone who's been hired by the town to do a job is able to do it, and to see to it as best you can that that job is done well. It's such a fundamental job that it becomes really a baseline measure of how effective the town is at dealing with problems that come up, about staying on top of problems it's familiar with. It's about being responsive to people's needs as those needs are presented. It's about being really aware. It's about really representing the issues that are obvious, like whether or not trash should be picked up or processed in this way or that, to really respond to how citizens feel about that. Mainly, I think, the most the Select Board can do in this regard is to keep the town open for business and make it an attractive place. As I said, keep the roads clear, keep the departments running. Fortunately, I think we're in a great position that way, that the town staff is really first rate. I think it's exceptionally well managed. I think we're really lucky to have the configuration of people and the jobs that we do. On the other hand, what we need to do, we absolutely have to do, is keep the budget tamed. Property taxes are a burden. Most of the property taxes go to schools, of course. You know, it's a large proportion. That part that is allocable to Brattleboro town management is a limited resource. My job would be to really help go into the minutia. It's broad and it's deep, and to go into the minutia in a disciplined fashion and do the right thing in accordance with all the rules and also in accordance with what people's needs are. You need to do the homework. And that's really something I'm pretty good at. That's why I have to run to meetings. The homework really takes a long time. We want to promote the community as a great place to live also. Another one of our strengths is the artistic community with music, theater, art, literature. And we need to support initiatives for job growth and job formation, business formation, and in a reasonable way promote the development of affordable housing. Housing across the board, high-quality housing, is really important to Brattleboro. That housing stock has actually improved immensely over the years. When I was a boy, there were parts of town that you really wouldn't want to show your visitors, who are on main thoroughfares. That's changed now. There have been a lot of really good actors in that. The property owners who've done well in keeping their properties, and also the Wyndham, what's now known as the Wyndham Housing Trust, has done a tremendous amount. I really want to support those initiatives, both public and private.
And last but not least, Spoon Agave.
Spoon Agave for the 3-year seat. This is an interesting question. I think the first thing I would ask is, what is affordability? We're all here. There's 18 people in this room. If I handed out 18 pieces of paper and asked everybody to write the definition of that word or what they mean by that word, we'd get 18 different ideas. So you can't get very far in any discussion until you get on the same page. And that's the first thing any board has to learn how to do. It's a very interesting question. I've sat through many town budget meetings, And I have sat through meetings listening to the select board pounding the table, insisting that we cannot raise taxes 1 penny. The people of this town cannot afford any more taxes, while at the very same moment, the parents of the community are at the high school voting in $500,000 for a new running track. So these are all very interesting things that we have to talk about. What do we mean by affordability? For whom? We have to know about income levels and lots of things, and so we know what we're talking about and where to go. I think, though, to get more towards my ideas, my answer, I'm going to support what I've heard candidate Joe Bushy over there saying. I think ultimately we have to look at self-reliance. And I talk about self-reliance. I am well aware, and everybody in this room and town is well aware, less and less money is forthcoming from the federal government every year. And if you watch what's going on at this very minute, it sounds like Congress is getting ready to remove the entire social net if it could. Less money from the feds is going to mean a lot less money from the state. We do, of course, have to continue trying to get every grant and subsidy and all the help we can possibly get from the state, but that's going to be less and less every year. We cannot go on assuming that we can be reliant on the state and the federal government. We have to begin learning how to take care of our own needs. And as Joe was pointing out, there are a myriad of things we can do. In fact, when you think back in history, if you went back 100 years ago, this town built its houses, it provided its water, it built a trolley system, it raised its own food without a nickel of federal subsidy. Were those the good old days? I don't know, yes and no. But I'm saying that what can this town do? It can do as much as it wants to do. We can have a future.
Thank you. Next question again via email. That email address, tj@wtsa.net. What would be the overall impact if to Brattleboro, if Vermont Yankee were to close, and if there were a revenue impact, what would Brattleboro do to make that up? We'll start with Hillary Cook.
Okay, well, thank you, Tim. As many know, I ran for Vermont State Senate in the fall, supporting a reliable and safe operating nuclear power plant in in Vernon. And I'm, if that vote had any, if that vote was a referendum, clearly the people in Windham County, the people in Brattleboro have resoundingly stated that they wish that plant closed in March of 2012. I think that really has to be, therefore, a reality that we all have to confront, we all have to face, we all have to be engaged with that reality. So that being the case, the closing of Vermont Yankee will have a profound effect for jobs, for the collateral jobs that will be lost. We need to take, this is something we should have been preparing for years in advance, and we have not. Brattleboro, again, and this goes back to Spoon's point, is that we need to be reliant on ourselves. We're not going to get the kind of help that we should get, that we would like to get. We need to rely on ourselves to be self-sufficient in trying to keep our economic engine going. And so what can me being in the position of a select board member do? Continue to encourage commerce. We can find other innovative ways to in having new business come into town, support, create new enterprise areas. We need to, and this is part of the good work that's being done that also Chris alluded to, the asset mapping group that's going on. We need to identify, we need to create a vision and a common vision that we all take ownership to. And that is really essential. You know, in mapping assets, it's not all just bricks and mortar. It can also be about culture. And we have a culture here in southern Vermont that says that what the vote said was that we don't want a nuclear power plant operating in southern Vermont. That's a powerful statement. And that's a statement we should be able to take to the country and say who we are and identify who we are. We've got to take ownership of the actions that we have made, that we have stated, that we've created. So thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Catherine Turnus.
I knew you were going to do that. One of the things I find really interesting about, you know, this panic about the nuclear plant closing, and what are we going to do? How are we going to survive? Where are we going to get our energy from? It's almost like the propaganda is that things like solar and wind and hydro and all this stuff is new. It never existed before, and we can't possibly replace the nuke plant. How could we replace it? Well, you know what? It can be replaced. Solar has been around for a long time, and we can support our community, people in the community who want to have solar panels. There was a gentleman who came, I have to relate this, a gentleman came before the DRB a year ago who went to his local hardware store and purchased for a very small amount of money and built a windmill on the roof of his barn to be able to create his electricity. And it was very successful. And there's no reason why, as individuals, we can't encourage this kind of building, you know, this kind of support for people who want to have something other than the nuke plant. And I just don't know what to say. Yes, it will have an impact, but you know what? We will handle it because we're Vermonters. And we will handle it, and it will happen.
Thank you. Joe Bushy.
Thank you, Tim. Your question, what would the impact be to Brattleboro if why close this? Well, it feels inevitable that it's going to close. I'm not sure just how much power they can actually wield in the form of governmental pressure to continue, but it feels inevitable that it will close. That certainly leaves a gap, not just in energy, but in the jobs of all those people that work there, many of whom are all local community members. And and not only that, but most all of those jobs seem to be good jobs, which are people that have disposable income, which no doubt feeds the local economy in ways that won't necessarily easily be replaced. I probably would liken that somewhat to the situation when another big company at the north end of town moved out of town, and it seemed like a lot of income not only left the town, but the state with that as well. Be that as it may, we, as Catherine has said, we are definitely going to have to figure out how to work around that and get by without Vermont Yankee. some would say we've had 40 years to prepare for that inevitable outcome, both from the community side and from the people who work their side. I think one of the ways that we could attempt to balance that void would be to look at creating other forms of energy generation systems, whether it's a biomass plant or some combination of biomass and solar and wind or otherwise, possibly at that same site, if the engineers and everything say that would be feasible. I think that it'll be a tough one to make up for the void that is left when Vermont Yankee leaves, as far as how it affects the local economy. I think in the bigger picture, as far as energy is concerned, I don't know that all that much of the energy generated from VY actually goes to Vermont. I think it goes to the grid and is brokered out elsewhere. So I would look to find other sustainable forms of renewable energy systems for the energy void left. And as far as the jobs, I would look to hope that those other systems could provide jobs as well for those highly skilled people that would be looking for them in the absence of Vermont Yankee. Thank you.
Thank you. John Wilmerding.
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm an anti-nuclear activist. For the past several years, I've run an emergency alert list for anti-nuclear activists here in the area that got its start through Nuclear Free Vermont. I also, before I moved here full-time, was very active in preventing the Shoreham nuclear power plant on Long Island to open, from opening. I think that there's a mix of effects that we're going to see when we close Vermont Yankee. And some of them are good. I mean, I purchased the first house in my life last year here in Brattleboro. And before I purchased that house with my wife, I had to talk with her and convince her that it's likely that we're going to close this thing because lots and lots of people, including us, don't want to live anywhere near a nuclear power plant. We've heard about 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, and we know that these things can blow up. And they can poison the atmosphere, and they can poison the water. And our strength here in Vermont is our clean air and our clean water. Now, I don't want to be a fearmonger in talking about this. What I want to do is say, I think we're okay here. I think we've made the right decision to close Vermont Yankee, but we may have to struggle against people who will try to keep it open over our will. I think we have to be ready for that kind of struggle, and I think that's why we need people who are solidly in the anti-nuclear camp in town government. But in terms of positive results economically from closing Vermont Yankee, I think housing values are going to go up. I think more people are going to want to live here. I think more companies are going to want to relocate here because they'll know that it becomes a more desirable place to live when the nuke is shut down.
Thank you. David Gartenstein.
I'm in favor of VY closing down in March 2012 as scheduled. I expect we're going to see significant struggle with the federal authorities seeking to preempt the decision that Vermont has made to close the facility as of that date, and federal regulators trying to keep that facility open along with the business owners. If VY closes in March 2012, maybe we can get the spent nuclear fuel that's sitting on the banks of the Connecticut River out of Vernon. And maybe, if Vermont Yankee closes, we can see the tritium leaks that are going on stopped. Those are health risks in the community that are unacceptable. It's very difficult to know just how, if VY closes in March 2012, all of the jobs will be replaced. There should be, if the facility has been planning appropriately, a very significant decommissioning fund, and hopefully people who are working in the plant and have skill in that area can participate in the long-term decommissioning of the plant. Hopefully we can invest in green jobs, in development of alternate energy technologies. That's something that needs to come also from the federal and the state level. And much of what we can do to bring about that result is to bring political pressure to bear. Our federal government has spent quite a bit of time bailing out big business rather than bailing out Main Street. And we need to bring pressure to bear also on the federal government to focus on Main Street rather than on Wall Street.
Thank you, David. Chris Chapman.
Hey, Tim, I'm wondering if I could just ask you to repeat the question. I think I'm a little, I've lost track of it.
The candidate question was, what do you think the overall impact of Vermont Yankee closing would be to Brattleboro? And if there's a revenue impact, what could the town do to make it up?
Well, if Vermont Yankee were to close, what we would see is a huge shift in revenues. The Select Board would be dealt quite a new hand of cards. I have to really answer the question in context of the Brattleboro Select Board. There's not an awful lot that the Brattleboro Select Board can do about the question at this point. What we have to, well, basically, we just have to play the cards we've been dealt. Does that mean that we will ask people to be more generous with all the funds that will no longer be forthcoming to the nonprofit community from Vermont Yankee? Possibly. Will it mean encouraging our citizens, our fellow neighbors, our fellow townspeople to be more sharp-eyed about other opportunities that come up? I'd say so. Will it have a profound effect on the culture here? I think that that is a leadership issue, that the Select Board, along with the rest of the town, and the Select Board cannot take responsibility for something that comes over the town line in a manner completely out of its control. The issue really boils down to what is it that we as a community will do, and that means what will everyone do with to fill the gap left by the change in revenues that would be coming from property taxes paid by Vermont Yankee, and also by a drying up of the salaries that people spend from the employees who live in and work in the area and spend in the area and those who live in the area. I'm honestly not sure what we'll do. I think Brattleboro is at the moment a little like a deer in the headlights on this one. We see something coming. What are we going to do? We answer this in terms of generalities. We answer this in terms of questions. And frankly, I don't know the answer to that, Tim. I have to be perfectly frank. It's something we'll have to deal with when it arrives, because what planning can there be that we can do? We can, in the short run, maybe nothing. In the long run, I think there's a lot. If the plant closes, we will have to look at what we did before there was such a plant. We have heard people talking about being self-reliant. I think that what we have to do is stand up as a community, as more of a community than before, to try to attract business, to make the place an attractive place to live. In effect, whether or not Vermont Yankee closes, we have a responsibility to really make the town like an airport. We want to make it a great place to land. We want to make it a safe place for somebody to land a business here. We want to make sure the running lights are on, the control tower is working, that it's on the map, that it's highly rated, that it's safe. Doing that without the revenues generated from the nuclear power plant will be more difficult. But will we as a community be willing to step up? I think so. I think in different ways, in ways that that we have not ascertained yet. Honestly, that's the best answer I can give you right now.
Thank you. Spoon Agave.
Spoon Agave, 3-year seat. I very much support the plant being closed on schedule when the license runs out in 2012. There will be an impact on this town, but I'm not so sure it's going to be nearly so much as a lot of people think. If you really analyze it, there's not going to be any impact on the amount of power that's available. Vermont Yankee only supplies about 2% of the New England power grid, and there is way in excess of that always available, and we know that because Yankee closes down about every 18 months for 3 or 4 weeks for maintenance. Used to be when it was a younger plant, it used to close down for a couple of months or more, and there was never even a second's interruption of power. There's plenty of power. As far as economically, yes, we'll lose some, but you know, when you stop and you think about how many of their workers actually live in Brattleboro, it's only a small fraction, and of their entire payroll, which sounds like an enormous amount, but most of that is spent elsewhere. And as has been mentioned, if the plant is decommissioned, as it must be, we don't want that plant laying on the edge of the river, locked up, deteriorating, rotting forever after. We need to get all of that stuff out of here, and that process is going to take years. It's going to involve a lot of people. So the decline, the economic decline, is going to be slow and steady. And there will be no problem in planning around that and in picking up the pieces and moving on without actually anybody hardly noticing in the long run. I guess that's the long and short of it. I'm not terribly concerned about the overall impact of it not operating.
And Ken Schneck.
People listening on the radio are going to think that I went home. I'm still here, Ken Schneck, running for the 3-year seat. I do want to borrow a page from my new financial advisor, Chris Chapman, and refocus this question on the select board, on the Brattleboro Selectboard, and what it is that we can do. One area that has not come up yet is going to be the impact of Vermont Yankee closing that it's going to have on the nonprofit sector. Yes, jobs, absolutely, and energy has come up. There's also going to be an impact on the nonprofit sector, and it's going to be noticeable. Vermont Yankee does support a lot of activities in town, including the fireworks at 4th of July, which I have enjoyed, including the parade on 4th of July, which I love those fire trucks. So is that a reason to keep it open? Absolutely not. It's going to close on schedule for, I mean, being the 8th in line. I'm not worried about that now, hearing everybody else, and I wasn't worried about that this morning. So that, to me, is not an issue. But I do think that the Select Board is going to have to play a role in working with the nonprofits in town, the charitable organizations that are going to be hit. They are, even if it's $1,000. I am the Dean of Students at Marlborough College, which is one of the largest nonprofits in the area. I have a lot of experience working with nonprofits with my beloved WVEW in town, and I know that when we're trying to put on events in town, when we're trying to raise money for our different events and raise awareness, every contribution really does make a difference. So there will be money coming out of a lot of the activities that happen in town, and I think the Select Board can do a lot to work with the nonprofits. That's experience in event planning and really thinking outside the box to raise money for the activities that are so important to our community. I do not want to see those activities go away, and I think the Select Board's going to have to play a role in really stimulating the nonprofits.
In sitting through the budget process this year for the Brattleboro Select Board, it's clear that the board has aimed decisions on police and fire facilities toward the three of you and the two incumbents who aren't running for re-election this year. So what would you do to deal with any facility changes for police and fire? And how would you come to a decision on that basis? We'll start with Catherine.
I guess it all comes down to every single line item has to be looked at. I mean, you can't just say, you just can't say overall, oh, well, this is what we're going to do. I mean, if it requires this building that we are in right now, that our community television stations and that our police is in, that our town manager is in, we have to make sure that it is run efficiently, and if it means that, you know, we have to make sure that people turn the heaters off when they leave, or make sure that all the lights are out when they go, or, you know, it's all kinds of things that we can do to make these facilities function a lot better. I last year was a little appalled at the amount of money that was spent because of suits against our police department because of things that happened, and it was something like $500,000 that was paid out. Well, that's a lot of money. But as far as the budget is concerned, I think it has to be taken a look at every single line item and decide which one is going to be affected and how the ramifications of another one. You know, it's like Ken was said with the nonprofits. What's going to get hurt? What's going to be injured if a decision is made to cut back?
Thank you. Joe Bushy.
I would fully support a unified, updated police and fire station. I just think it would be tough to figure out how to fit that into the budget in the near to not too distant future. What would the sewer plant upgrade and all that, the impact that has on the current budget? Taxes are already at the limit, and so I think, well, I think it is probably a much needed improvement for the town. I think it will be probably some time before we figure out how to fit that in. Thank you.
Thank you. John Wilmerding.
I have not had the opportunity to study in detail the proposal for a new police and fire station, or any aspect really of the financial management of those two departments. I think we have good people in both of those departments. I think they do a splendid job doing what they're doing. I would like to see, in the case of the police department, maybe a bit more people on foot and people on bicycle. The whole community policing concept that was pioneered by Glenn Campbell before he became Bruce Campbell, before he became the town manager and when he was police chief. I'm happy that we are careful and that we have a police department and a fire department that serve our community, and I think serve it very well. I think we do have to look at every single line item, as Catherine has said, in the budgets of different town departments. We have to really take a close, hard look at where all our tax money goes. I'm a little worried sometimes when I pass the municipal center and there are 8 police cruisers sitting in the lot. I'm wondering if maybe we have a bit of overkill in the amount of money that we're spending in the department in that particular area. I don't know. Anyway, that's about what I want to say on that topic.
Thank you, John. David Gartenstein.
Thank you. Fire and police are among the most core of municipal services, along with maintenance of roads. And I think we probably need to give credit where credit is due. I think that our select board that's currently in place has carefully reviewed the budgets for those 2 agencies, and that those agencies are operating about as leanly as they can. I think that the town manager and the select board need to be given credit for having a responsible capital maintenance program for those agencies to make sure that equipment isn't deteriorating and to make sure that emergency services are being provided effectively in town. One of the things that I've seen in the on the school boards, both the high school and the town school board, is that in many ways, the costs that we deal with have to do with personnel. And I don't know when the collective bargaining agreement is up for renewal and for renegotiation with town employees, but the federal government and the state government have both either frozen wages or cut wages for employees. And our alternatives sometimes become either RIFs or wage freezes and wage cuts. Those are not attractive alternatives, but they're things that we need to consider, particularly in tough economic times.
Thank you, David. Chris Chapman.
Tim, I'm going to ask you once again to repeat the question. You're talking to a fellow who nervous about this. As part of preparing for a radio interview, went and got a haircut today. So,
You see, I didn't take the same approach.
could you just repeat?
Yes,
the question?
the question was that over the course of the budget process, it was clear that next year's board will be asked to deal in some way, shape, or form with the state of the town's fire and police facilities. How would you, as a board member, investigate that process and reach a conclusion?
Thanks, Tim. I have to look to history on this one. This question is perennial. I've heard this question for at least 5 years. I've seen it put before the Select Board a number of times. And yet the Select Board always makes the same decision. Now, this is a group of people who deliberate on the data, on the facts, and on the needs. And time after time, it has come up with the same answer. We have to live with the status quo. Financially, it's not feasible. This is where being a Select Board member is difficult. Because I'll tell you what I would prefer. I'd like a state-of-the-art, brand-new facility. Who wouldn't? We need it. We're seeing crime elsewhere as never before. Shocking stuff going on the other side of the border in Mexico, where police services are utterly inadequate to shovel against the tide of crime. Fortunately, here we don't have that same problem. We do have similar problems on a smaller scale of things happening outside of town, coming into town, and really burdening the police department, burdening the schools with these sorts of things. I would like, here, put me on the record for this. I am deeply in favor of an up-to-date facility for these basic services. What I don't know is whether we can afford it. Can we afford to bond for that? We have a, correct me if I'm wrong, Spoon, you know this data, I think, as a sitting board member. $35 million bond for the wastewater treatment plant. We've got, let me see, we bought a fire truck, right? A couple of years ago at the town meeting, financed it. How much was that, Dora? Was that $350,000? And we're just sort of starting down the road to pay for that. I didn't bring with me a full recollection. In fact, I only brought a bit of a recollection of the size of our existing capital budget. I just don't know as we can afford it now. We have to look at it. And as a one-year member of the board, I would give everything I have to try to make it happen. Can I promise that I would really push for it, even if the evidence said we can't afford it? No. I wouldn't do that. But I will look at it. If what you're trying to accomplish by getting an answer to that question is, what is this candidate going to do that's reasonable in the best interests of the town? I'm telling you, I'm going to engage in the process. Review the facts. Review really where we are. Get real about what is possible. Weigh it against what we want. Weigh that again against what we can do financially. And then make a decision, even if it's a tough decision, and even if it's a decision I'd rather not make. I'm going to do the thing that we have to do, and as a member of the team. And it's going to change the subject a little bit. But I told you I'm a one-year candidate. Look at the candidates we have for the one-year term. You know, we've got a really good slate here. I think that if the charter were changed so that you couldn't run for 1 year again, I don't think you'd see as many people stepping up. One of the things that makes Brattleboro a really great town is the opportunity for people to step up and serve. Hugely important. I would like to see us not eliminate the 1-year term. I think it's really valuable for the town. I think it's really valuable for the individuals who step up. It builds character on both the part of the individual and the town, really. So thank you.
Thank you. Spoon Agave.
Spoon Agave, 3-year term. This is a wonderful issue. I have a lot of experience with this issue because I sat for a while on the Police and Fire Facility Committee and on the Select Board and on the Finance Committee. So I have a lot of history. That committee was started before I was a member in 1998, almost 13 years ago. At the beginning, I don't know why, I wasn't there, but the process really bogged down. And finally, though, after a few years, it got started again. And after a few years' work and a lot of money on hiring consultants and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the Select Board came up with a plan, a very expensive plan, to build a new police and fire facility, which was rejected by the community. And I think rightly so, but that's another matter. Had, in 1998, the Select Board been of the sort that actually planned, had some foresight, and raised taxes just a little bit and created a sinking fund, started saving for a police and fire station, by now we could have $6 or $7 or $8 or $9 million in the bank and breaking ground. Instead, it doesn't even look as though we're going to be even able to plan for it. But so be it. We are where we are. What this also involves is this whole thing, as was raised just a moment ago by Mr. Chapman, capitalization, long-term capitalization planning. Those are very expensive items. We have schools that are deteriorating. I pointed out in my work on the Finance Committee a couple of years ago, in the next 20 to 40 years, this town could have as much as $200 million worth of capitalization expenses, what with the schools and police and fire and everything else, the sewer and what have you. So, again, this is why I feel I want to come on as the candidate concerned about the future planning. This could have been planned for. It's also interesting to note that the work on this started 13 years ago, and in that time, there doesn't appear to be any appreciable increase in crime. So as hard as it is to work out, as hard as it is for the police to work out of the facilities that they're in, they're still managing, and they're managing very well. And I think a lot of the problems they've had in the past had more to do with their own leadership than it had to do with the space they were working out of. Again, the fire department, which is in a very tough space to work with, is still providing not only good fire protection, but I think the very best fire protection in this state. So we do need to upgrade those facilities. I don't know or think it's going to happen right away, but we have a lot to learn.
Thank you. Ken Schneck.
As the dean of 267 18 to 22-year-olds, holy cow, do I want as great of a fire and police department as possible, just for the safety, for the protection of my students, for all the people in this area. You know, I would like to see the new facility mentioned before and raise it a couple hovercrafts, but unfortunately we can afford hovercrafts right now as much as we can afford a new facility. It's just not where we are. It's not a lack of desire, it just frankly is a lack of funding from looking through those budgets. I think you have to start from a place of, I'll speak from the I start from a place of respect for select boards past. This is not the first time this issue has come up. These are select boards that have poured through numbers and looked at the different possibilities. And it's really difficult for me to believe there was ever someone sitting at this table who said, I do not want a better police or fire department. I just don't believe that that ever happened. Unfortunately, we just don't have the funds right now. There are a number of things to pay off. it is going to be a focus for me because, again, health and safety is my background and it's one of my biggest passions. But we need to do it in a way that's not going to affect the wellness of the rest of our community.
Thank you. Hillary Cook.
Thank you, Tim. Here we go, kicking this can down the road. One more year. As long as I've been a town meeting rep, we have talked about fire and police and how can we serve them with a better facility. To the police department and to the fire department, thank you so much for what you do for the town, for the citizens, and for the neighboring towns and citizens that you serve on a moment's notice. Thanks so much. Here's an unusual proposal. I would suggest that the police, we need to understand, we need to see what the facility that the police is operating in to understand how difficult it is for them to execute their work. I think they do a remarkable job in the facility that they are, and you know what? You don't hear a whole lot of complaints. And I agree. I think there's a great deal of agreement here that in the context of a sewer plant that is daunting and one that really is a reality of what we have to finance. But it does get back to the capitalization. That is a responsibility of the select board to create and maintain and to fund a capital account. A couple years ago, we bonded $800,000 for asphalt paving. I'm still shaking my head on that one. That's something that is here today and will need to be replaced, I hope, before that bond is finished being paid for. I say, let's be serious about our capital account and let's start putting some money into it so that we can serve our police and fire, so that they can serve the citizens here in Brattleboro. Thanks.
Thank you. One of the realities of commercial radio, and to a lesser extent community TV, is that timing is occasionally an issue. Mm-hmm. And I want to firstly say thank you to all of you for putting your names forward for this community. All of you in your own ways are a credit to the kind of community that Brattleboro is, and each of you would bring a lot of skill if you were elected. So firstly, my hat's off to all of you. Thank you. Secondly, it's now up to the community, because a couple of things that community members can do. One, vote. If you're not registered to vote, go to your town clerk's office in Brattleboro or any town clerk in Vermont, or go to a justice of the peace. In fact, I even got registration forms myself in my car. Register you to vote. By the way, I'm the Board of Civil Authority Chair in Vernon, just so you, in case you're asking. You have until the end of business next Wednesday, the 23rd, to register to vote. And then comes Election Day. If you aren't available for polling hours, get an absentee ballot from the town clerk before the end of business on Monday. Voting in Brattleboro 9 to 7 at Brattleboro Union High School. Please vote. Please pay attention to the decisions made by your elected leaders. Ask them questions. And above all, continue to care about a very, very fine community. Thank you to everybody, and thank you to our candidates. Please have a good night.